All right, how's everybody doing? Not sure if anybody's in here or not, but just got news that a person who actually shot and killed a person during a movie filming, knowingly using a live firearm, just had all their charges dropped against them. Makes me wonder because the actual person that did the shooting is a huge liberal who is anti gun, is on the board of gun control advocacies, who has self proclaimed to already say that he's very much aware of gun safety because he's on these gun boards that talks about the necessity for gun safety, and he's an expert about it because he's been trained so many times in the film industry, knows all about it, even by his own statements. And yet, in a movie, he shoots and kills a woman. Now, nobody believes that he did this intentionally. That's not the point. It's not what the law talks about. And I am trying to figure out how to bring this up. So, what we're talking about is Alec Baldwin, who was a huge anti gun, anti Second Amendment individual who makes a shit ton of money out of making movies using guns. Hmm. That right there would think you would be a hypocrite in the first place. And if you can't get beyond that, you have to realize that he is on a anti Second Amendment. I'm not sure if it's the Brady campaign. I'm not sure who it is. He is on a board that is truly anti Second Amendment. So he's very anti gun, but yet he makes his living in a lot of different movies using guns in Hollywood. So, first of all, why wouldn't you think that if you're an anti Second Amendment right, a God given constitutional right, if you're against that, wouldn't that go against your principles to make a living off of using firearms in your movies? Why wouldn't you not choose to make your living using those firearms? And since you do, it just shows the hypocrisy that, oh, yeah, well, it's cool to use guns, but Well, it's only the elite that can have guns. Yeah. We haven't seen that before ever. So Alec Baldwin, some B, C, D rate actor, is making a movie called Rust. They've had a lot of trouble on this set, apparently, especially with the armors. That anytime you're on a movie set using firearms, you have to have armors. Well, the individual, Helena, well, no, Helena Hutchins was the one that was killed. I don't remember. Let's see if I can see who this was. It's the individual that was it's the individual that was working as the armor on the scene. Apparently, this was the only second movie she ever worked on. She was a very young female. Uh, Apparently, her father was a quite accomplished individual in the armor scene for movies for many years, and this was his daughter that got the role in this B C rated movie, whatever he was in. Hannah Gutierrez Reed. That's who it is. Hannah Gutierrez Reed. Uh, so she gets the role as the armor in this movie because her dad is pretty famous. He's been in the movie industry for quite a while as an armor, and he's well respected as an armor. Well, this is like the only second time she's been on there, and apparently they had already fired, or actually not fired. The other armors had walked off like the day before, so she's now in charge. She's on this movie set for this C-rated actor, Alec Baldwin, on this what could only be described as a B-rate movie. Hey, cool frog. See you up there, buddy. Thanks for jumping on. Bring some other folks in here. I'm doing this solo for the first time and talking about uh, the breaking news that just came in that is just absolutely ridiculous. So there's a mix up on the scene. Nobody actually knows, or on the set, nobody actually knows really what happened. But what happened is live rounds were mixed up with dummy rounds that should have been on the set for Alec Baldwin to do this scene where he's in a church and he's pulling out a single action revolver in a church and cocking the hammer. And we've all seen the video of this, of him doing it several times. And every time he pulls it out, you can see his fingers on the trigger. And that's an important thing to note, that because in his statement after the shooting happened, he says his finger was never on the trigger. Well, we've seen a ton of video evidence that his finger was on the trigger every time he was doing it before the incident happened. So during this sequence, somehow a live round got mixed up into the dummy rounds, the blank rounds, whatever they were using. And all of those are very much distinguishable in any part of the law enforcement community. Dummy rounds, blank rounds, they're all different color coded. They have, no primers in them. Uh, they're distinguishable by several different ways. So, in law enforcement, when you're using dummy rounds, as a training drill, they're dummy rounds, or if you're using blank fire rounds, you're using them in a blank fire gun only that will only shoot blank fire rounds. They have a different barrel, they have a different breech block, everything else. They can't fire a live round. They were using live fire guns on this scene. Apparently, that is normal because they want the appearance in the movie to be as realistic as possible. So it's up to the armorer, apparently, to make sure that the right ammunition is being used, whether that's live fire, which apparently there should never be live fire. I'm just assuming that on a movie set, but they're using dummy rounds or blank rounds, possibly. So, some way or another, live rounds got onto this set. And a live round was loaded into the gun that Alec Baldwin was using. Now, as we talked about earlier, Alec Baldwin is very familiar with guns. He's a anti-gun advocate. He says he's an expert on gun safety that he's said in his own statements because he's used guns many, many, many times in his movies, making money off of playing movies using a gun, yet he's anti-gun. So we go back to the whole hypocrite thing right there. So if anybody knows anything, now Hollywood has rules and recommendations. Well, they have hard, fast rules that says anytime firearms are used in a movie, they have rules in place that have to be checked to make sure that a live gun with a live round is not used in a scene to prevent this kind of thing. They've already shown that Alec Baldwin uh, didn't abide by these rules. Okay, he took a gun that someone else told him that someone else told them that this was a cold gun. Here's the bottom line: the person who handles a gun is the one that is responsible for knowing whether that gun is loaded or not loaded. He broke every one of the four cardinal rules of gun safety. And this wasn't even in a filming sequence. This was in a uh, whatever they call it, a practice leading up to it, rehearsal, whatever those idiots in Hollywood do. So he was given a gun that was told that it was a cold gun, meaning that, well, there was no live ammunition. He knew it was a live firearm. He knew that it was what he was handling was a real firearm. It was not a replica. It was not something that was incapable of firing a round. He knew it was a real gun. Apparently, he just seemed to assume that it didn't have any live ammunition. It is the gun handler's responsibility. That is the last check to know the condition of that firearm, to abide by the safety rules. And he did not do it. And consequently, he aimed a firearm straight at an individual, pulled the trigger, shot and killed a woman, and injured another person. He did that. There's no dispute. No dispute. He did that. He then went on to make extensive videos of being investigated by law enforcement officers, claiming that he never had his finger on the trigger, which we've seen in the videos prior to leading up this. Every time he pulled the gun out. His finger was on the trigger. Said he never pulled the trigger. The gun just went off. Made up some other excuses. The FBI lab took this gun, destroyed it before they could get it to actually go off without pulling the trigger, meaning they destroyed it. They hit it with hammers, everything that an individual cannot do. So the only way this gun went off is by the fact that he pulled the gun, he pulled a hammer to the rear, he had his finger on the trigger, he aimed in at Helena Hutchins, and he pulled the trigger and he killed that woman and shot the I'm not sure what his title was, but the individual behind him who survived. Helena Hutchins didn't. So it took forever for him to be charged, okay, because he's a Hollywood leftist, has had at some stature as a freaking Hollywood person. I don't know. I always thought he was a very sub-rate actor. Anyway, the armorer was also charged. Now, she's the one who was supposed to be responsible for setting things up, for the actors to use. She may have some culpability if she did something that was um, intentionally or even unintentionally wrong by allowing live ammunition be onto the set. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. The last person who is in charge of gun safety is the person holding the firearm. And Baldwin knew that. He has stated that. He is on a board of gun control. He's on a board of gun control, which wants to get guns out of the hands of people. Okay. So why is he doing a movie about having guns? I mean, how much of a hypocrite can you be? If you don't want guns in the hand of people, why are you doing a movie about it? Do a movie about not having guns in the hands of people. Where there's some kind of utopia and everybody's, singing kumbaya and all that kind of crap. But no, he makes his living off of doing this stuff. At the same time, he is trying to advocate for citizens not being allowed to have our God-given Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves against harm. At one point, he made a statement, and I believe it was after the Kyle Rittenhouse uh, verdict, and I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But he had made a statement that said, "Well, I wish I know what it was like to shoot somebody in accident." Well, guess what? He got his wish. Nobody believes, or there is no evidence that Alec Baldwin shot Helena Hutchins and the other gentleman, and I don't know his name off the top of my head, in malice. Nothing saying that he intentionally wanted to shoot them. Okay, I mean that would be premeditated murder. That's not what it was. What it was involuntary manslaughter. And New Mexico has a seriously low um, maximum sentence range for involuntary manslaughter was 18 months. Now, the original prosecutor, and I don't recall her name right now, was elected to the, I believe she became a part of the House of Representatives for New Mexico. She was originally assigned as a special prosecutor. And she added an additional charge of gun enhancement that increased that to 5 years plus the 18 months. She eventually recused herself because apparently, from what I know, which is everything I've seen is actually right, that once she was a member of Congress, she could not act as a special prosecutor. Before she did, I believe it was before she did, she dropped the gun enhancement charge because there was a change in the law. The law was different when the incident happened. The law changed after it happened. So she could not use the present law because of you have to be tried or charged in the law that is present when the incident occurs. So the enhancement, I believe it was a brandishing clause. She had to drop that. But then she had to recuse herself because she was a member of Congress at that time and couldn't hold the position of the special prosecutor or the prosecutor that was in charge. So I don't know who it reverted back to. Here's what I do know, and here's what everybody knows. Alec Baldwin had a live fire firearm in his hand. Alec Baldwin knew he had a live fire firearm in his hand. Alec Baldwin did not check that firearm to whether it contained live rounds or dummy rounds. He didn't check it. The person holding the firearm is the person responsible for whatever you do with that firearm. Every firearms, and I'm a firearms instructor, every firearms instructor will tell you, I don't care at what level, whether you're from a hunter safety course, through NRA, through any other agency, up through law enforcement, that you are responsible for knowing what is in your firearm. There are the four cardinal safety rules. Always assume every gun is loaded. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Never point your firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy. And know your target and what's beyond it. If you violate one, maybe two of those rules, as long as you abide by the other ones, nothing detrimental will ever happen. Okay. You got to mess up really bad to actually injure somebody. Alec Baldwin disregarded all of those safety rules, didn't care, took a firearm from somebody else that told him it was okay, and then started practicing by pointing, drawing a hammer, and pulling the trigger towards a person on the film crew, shot and killed her, and shot somebody else behind her. That is the definition of involuntary manslaughter. And again, as I said, the sentence for involuntary manslaughter in New Mexico is only 18 months. It's a felony, but it's only 18 months for killing another individual with that type of recklessness. And now we get to this. Charges against Alec Baldwin have been dropped in the fatal on-set rush shooting, according to sources familiar with the matter. Baldwin had been charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter after fatally shooting. There's no doubt he did it. He fatally shot cinematographer Helena Hutchins, 42, on the New Mexico set of the Western in October of 2021. The actor was practicing his cross draw when the gun fired, striking the cinematographer and director Joel Souza, that I couldn't remember that name earlier, who suffered a non-life-threatening injury. And here we get into this. We are pleased with the decision to dismiss the case against Alec Baldwin, and we encourage a proper investigation into the facts and circumstances of this tragic accident. We already know the facts of what happened. He pulled out a gun with a live round in it that he didn't check, pointed it at a woman, cocked the hammer, pulled the trigger, and shot and killed her. And shot Sousa, which was behind her. Those are the facts. He did that. They're not disputed. That is involuntary manslaughter. And they dropped the charges? Why? We go on. The film's armorer, Hannah Gutierrez, who was also charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, gun enhancement charges for both of them were dropped. And as I alluded to that earlier, I believe that was because the law that they originally charged him with the gun enhancement charges was actually passed after that was after the charges were filed, and then the law was changed in a couple of months later. But either way, you have to be charged on what the laws were in place at the time of the incident. Okay, so if something happens in 2021, they pass a law in 2022 that changes the law, you can't be held to the new standards. Whether those standards are good or bad, doesn't matter. You have to be charged under the laws that were in place at the time of the incident. So Gutierrez has been scheduled to appear in preliminary hearing on May 3rd. Her attorney intends to plead not guilty, as that she had no idea how the live rounds ended up in the gun. You know, I'm sure somebody knows, but this is a lot of chaos. I believe the armor's crew was walked off the day before, so she was just brought on. There's a lot of hearsay about that. Her attorneys Thursday still faces charges, saying a statement that they fully expect in the process that Hannah will also be exonerated. Well, first of all, nobody should be exonerated because a woman was shot and killed. Okay, this was not an accident. Okay, you have 4 stages. You have an accident, you have negligence, you have recklessness, and you have intention. Those are the 4 parts of the law that I understand it through the attorney that I have studied under for law of self-defense and use of force law. Accident is an accident. Accident is something that is simply an accident, and there's no culpability in that whatsoever. It is simply something that no one could have foreseen. Negligence, as I understand it, negligence is is a condition where you should have known better, but you didn't or didn't recognize it. And that is something that will rise to the level of civil liability, but not criminal. Recklessness is something that you knew um, could create an incident, but you willfully disregarded it. Something kind of akin, if I've understood it correctly, would be like DUI. Okay. You knew that you were at the bar drinking, and you knew that you would get drunk and not be able to get into your car and drive home safely, but you did it anyway. And something happened. That is recklessness. That's criminally liable. And then you have intentional, which you go out to actually harm somebody or do somebody harm. That's intentional. So the difference of all this stuff is that accident is a true accident. Nobody's liable. No, it was an accident that nobody knew that could happen. You know, I think Andrew Branca uses the analogy that you go over to your grandmother's house, and she lives in the third floor of an apartment. She wants her piano moved from one side of the room to the other. You're the grandson. So you're like, okay, grandma, I'll move this over there. Well, you move the piano. Well, you move the piano over to a piece of the floor that's rotten. You didn't know it was rotten. She didn't know it was rotten. Nobody knew it was rotten. The piano falls through the floor, lands on top of somebody else on the floor below, and kills them. That's an accident. Nobody knew anything about it. That is an accident. Negligence, again, is that you should have known that what you were doing was going to put somebody in jeopardy, but you just didn't think about it. So that's negligence. That's you can be civilly liable. You can have a civil lawsuit against you because the burden of proof for a civil case is much lower. It's a preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Then you get into recklessness. That means that you knew something was going to happen. You knew it could happen. You did it anyway, and it did happen. That's recklessness. Now you're criminally liable. And then you have the actual intent. So that's the four stages. So in the case of this, at the very least, he's negligent. I would even uh, go to this is recklessness because he knew he this is not his first time handling firearms. He's handled them in many movies several times. Has said on record that he's an expert in gun safety. He's on the board of a gun control group. He knows the dangers of handling firearms, yet he did it anyway, failed to do the proper checks, and it resulted in the loss of life and great bodily harm to somebody else. So he does this. He kills a person. And yet, all of the charges just got dropped. Why did they get dropped? Well, I'm going to go into pure speculation right now. I'm going to say number one, he's a part of the ultra left wing activist that infest Hollywood. He makes his money often doing B-rate movies, often using firearms, which generate money, so it goes into his coffers. They're elitist hypocrites, again, because they tell everyone else, oh, no, you don't have, the average American doesn't have the God given, constitutionally preserved right to armed self defense. And if you know anything about the gun laws in California, they only preserve that for the prestigious people that they deem. Normal citizenry can't get that. And again, he makes his money off of doing these things. And they're very well connected. And you can't have a gun control advocate who's on the board of of a gun control advocacy getting convicted of a gun related crime. I want to ask you, what would happen if you or I were ever in this situation? You were doing an innocent movie. You were a YouTube content producer. So you're making a little movie, and maybe it's a spaghetti western or something you're trying to do, whatever. And you've got this single six revolver, which is exactly what Alec Baldwin had. And you shoot your buddy that you're filming with because somehow a live round got in this. You think you would have not been arrested for over a year and a half while Baldwin was out living his life, while they were collecting evidence and trying to get his phone and all this bullshit that took place? No, you would have been arrested immediately. You'd have spent your ass in fucking jail for the entire time. You would not have been had the charges dropped. You would have been prosecuted to the full extent because you're a poor peon and you're not a freaking member of the elitist left extremist. That's what would have happened. Now we have Baldwin. All charges are dropped. We saw the original charges dropped a few months ago, which was the gun enhancement, which would have added another 5 years. And actually, according to New Mexico law, really was the right thing to do. Doesn't mean New Mexico law is correct or, what we would all like it to be. But according to the law, that charge needed to be dropped because it was not in effect during the time of the crime. Or apparently it's not a crime. We'll call it the incident. Now, all charges being dropped. Bullshit, folks. This is just ridiculous. This is a never another piece of crap leftist, leftist Hollywood elite getting off that no one else, not you and I, would ever have gotten off on this because it is absolutely a clear case of involuntary manslaughter. He had the gun in his hand. He pulled the trigger, fired the gun, pointed at a person, and killed that person. That was not an accident. And yet he gets off. And these are the people trying to tell you how you are supposed to live your life. This is a leftist progressive bullshit narrative that they're trying to tell everybody. I don't care if you are on the leftist progressive side. You're a nobody just because you're a citizen and you're like, yeah, I'm a leftist progressive LB, AB, GC, XY, whatever freaking group. I don't care all that bullshit. If you did this stunt, you'd be in jail, you'd be in prison. He's not. You are not part of that group. They are using you. All right. So, anyway, that's all I've got to say tonight. So, thank you to everybody that was on here. Thank you to everybody that will see this later as a recording. And we will get back soon. But this just popped up, and I just felt that I needed to say something about this because this is just absolutely not right. Nobody should stand for this. I don't care what side of the aisle, political, religious, any other thing. No, nobody that commits this negligence and recklessness, and I would say it's recklessness, not negligence. It's beyond that. It's recklessness. Doesn't get held accountable. Why? Why do they not get held accountable? Because this area of New Mexico is wanting to attract more uh, cinema into their region so they can get more revenue. Well, if you got a guy that kills somebody and then you prosecute him, that's going to deter other filmmakers to come in and do that in case they have an accident, which is not an accident, but an act of negligence or recklessness. They're going to be like, "Oh, well, we're going to be held responsible. We won't go there. We'll go to some other very liberal place so we won't get charged." Well, they just showed they won't get charged. So, yeah, bring it on in. We don't care what accidents happen. Just bring us your revenue. And that is the bullshit that is happening. It's even happening here in Georgia, south of Atlanta. Hollywood is coming in trying to make movies and stuff, bringing a bunch of Hollywood leftists in. They need to go the hell back to Hollywood and stay there, in my opinion. But anyway, as always, hey, if you like this, give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. If you have any comments, leave them below. Contact me if you want to discuss this, and we will be back on. Other than that, everyone have a good night, and we will see you later. Everybody have a good night.